Chapter 1. First Contact. Title: First Contact. The night sky above the remote Nevada desert was alive with stars as Dr. Adrian Cole adjusted the alignment of the dish antenna. He leaned over his console, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he prepared the next scan. The hum of the machinery around him was the only sound, broken occasionally by the static crackle of the radio transmitter. "You're working late, Cole," said Ethan Klein, a physicist and Adrian's closest colleague, as he entered the control room with a steaming mug of coffee in hand. "Should I be worried you're trying to talk to aliens without me?" Adrian glanced up with a smirk. "If you don't want to miss the moment humanity finally says hello to the cosmos, you'd better keep that coffee coming." Ethan chuckled, settling into the chair beside Adrian. "You think tonight's the night?" "Unlikely," Adrian replied, his voice tinged with both determination and fatigue. "But if we don't keep listening, we'll never know when they might finally call." The equipment hummed on, scanning distant radio frequencies for any sign of extraterrestrial intelligence. Suddenly, the static changed. A rhythmic, deliberate pattern emerged, cutting through the noise like a heartbeat. Adrian froze. "Ethan, are you hearing this?" he whispered, his eyes locked on the console. Ethan leaned in, his face quickly paling as he recognized the pattern. "That's not random. It's deliberate." Adrian's fingers danced over the controls, isolating the signal. "It's a transmission. They're talking." Ethan's breath caught. "Holy, Adrian, this is it." Adrian nodded, his voice steadier than he felt. "Get the recording equipment running. We need to document everything." 4 hours, they worked to decode the message. It wasn't a language they recognized, but its structure suggested advanced intelligence. As dawn broke over the desert, the signal stopped abruptly, leaving only silence. "They know we're here," Ethan murmured, staring at the now blank console. "What do we do?" Adrian leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. "We reply." The following weeks were a blur. The discovery was kept under wraps by a small team of scientists, politicians, and military advisors. Adrian was thrust into the spotlight as humanity's unofficial ambassador, tasked with drafting a response to the alien transmission. "This isn't just about science anymore," said General Marcus Hayes during a tense meeting at the Pentagon. "We're talking about the potential for first contact with a civilization that could be light years ahead of us in technology. We need to approach this carefully." "I agree," Adrian replied, his tone firm. "But fear isn't the answer. If they wanted to attack us, they wouldn't have sent a greeting first. This is an opportunity to learn, to grow, or to invite disaster," Hayes countered. "You're placing a lot of trust in beings we know nothing about." Adrian's expression hardened. "With respect, General, we know just as little about their intentions as they do about ours. If we approach this with hostility, we'll confirm their worst fears. We need to show them that humanity can be more than just warriors." After hours of debate, the group agreed to send a carefully crafted message. Adrian, with Ethan's help, composed a simple but heartfelt reply. They transmitted it using the same frequency and waited. 3 weeks later, the aliens replied. The signal was more complex this time, but also clearer. Through mathematics and shared scientific principles, they conveyed their identity as the Celestial Concord, a coalition of advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They invited humanity to meet them at a neutral location in space to begin discussions. Adrian was exhilarated. "This is it. This is what we've been waiting for." Ethan wasn't so sure. "It feels too convenient. Why reach out now, after all this time? And why us?" Adrian shrugged. "Maybe they're curious. Or maybe they see potential in us. Or they see a threat, Ethan muttered under his breath. Despite the skepticism, preparations began for Adrian and a small team to represent humanity. The Concorde provided the coordinates for the meeting, a massive station orbiting a distant star. Adrian boarded the experimental Starship Horizon, its engines powered by humanity's first attempts at reverse-engineering alien physics from old myths of UFO sightings. As the Horizon approached the Concorde station, Adrian gazed out the viewport, his breath catching at the sight. The station was a masterpiece of engineering, a vast structure of shimmering metals and glowing lights. It was both alien and awe-inspiring. "Welcome, Earth representatives," a voice greeted them as the ship docked. Adrian stepped onto the platform to find himself face to face with a group of beings of varying shapes and sizes, their appearances as diverse as the stars. "I am Dr. Adrian Cole, representing humanity," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. One of the aliens, a tall, regal figure with translucent skin and glowing eyes, stepped forward. "I am Oren, a speaker for the Celestial Concorde. We welcome you to our station." Adrian bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "It is an honor to meet you." As the initial introductions concluded, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that some of the Concorde members regarded him with suspicion. Their polite smiles seemed too practiced, their words too careful. Later, in a private moment with Ethan, who had joined as part of the crew, Adrian muttered, "Something feels off. They're welcoming us, but they're watching us, studying us." Ethan frowned. "Maybe they're wondering the same thing we are, whether we're a threat." Adrian sighed. "I hope they don't push too hard. They don't know us yet, Ethan. And if they do, the universe will learn too late why humans kept saying, 'Please don't make us mad.'" Ethan stared at him for a moment, then nodded grimly. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that." The meeting with the Concorde was only the beginning. Beneath the surface of diplomacy, Adrian sensed currents of unease, a fragile peace that could shatter with a single misstep. For now, humanity's role in the galaxy remained uncertain, but Adrian vowed to navigate the storm with determination and caution. Chapter 2. A Fractured Peace. Title: A Fractured P. The Celestial Concorde station was as magnificent inside as it was outside. Adrian Cole walked along its vast corridors, his footsteps echoing against polished, otherworldly metal. The walls shimmered with faintly glowing patterns that seemed to pulse in sync with the station's power. To his left, Ethan Klein, his closest confidant, kept pace, looking every bit as amazed and uneasy as Adrian felt. "I don't trust them," Ethan muttered under his breath, glancing at a group of Concorde delegates passing by. Their glowing eyes followed the humans with quiet intensity, their faces inscrutable. "They're cautious, not hostile," Adrian replied, keeping his voice low. "They don't know what to make of us yet." Ethan snorted softly. "Cautious, huh? Feels more like they're sizing us up." Before Adrian could respond, a voice called out from ahead. "Dr. Cole, the Council is ready for you." The speaker was Oren, the Concorde's liaison to Earth, tall and elegant with translucent skin that shimmered faintly under the station's light. Adrian nodded, stepping forward with Ethan trailing behind. The council chamber was an immense circular room, its domed ceiling alive with holographic constellations. Delegates from various civilizations sat in elevated seats that surrounded a central platform, where Adrian and Ethan stood. Each delegate's appearance was unique. Some were encased in shimmering suits, others bore scales, feathers, or crystalline forms. "Welcome, representatives of Earth," Oren said, his voice resonating through the chamber. "You have been invited here to discuss your species' potential role within the Concorde." Adrian inclined his head respectfully. "It is an honor to be here. Humanity is eager to learn and to share what we can offer." A delegate with a carapace-like body leaned forward, its voice clicking in a strange rhythm. "Your world's rapid technological growth is concerning. Historically, such development leads to aggression." Adrian felt Ethan tense beside him. He remained calm, meeting the delegate's gaze. "Humanity has faced challenges, yes. But our advancements have also brought peace and prosperity to many parts of our planet. We strive to build, not to destroy." Another delegate, whose form was a shifting mass of light, chimed in. "Your history is riddled with violence. Wars, destruction, chaos. What assurance do we have that you will not bring such tendencies to the stars?" Adrian's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice measured. "Our history is complex, as I'm sure yours is. What defines us now is not where we've been, but where we're going. Humanity is capable of great things: compassion, ingenuity, collaboration. I hope to prove that to you." The murmurs of the council filled the chamber, a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Oren raised a hand, silencing the voices. "For now, we observe. Your presence here is an opportunity, Dr. Cole. Use it wisely." The meeting concluded, and Adrian and Ethan were escorted back to their quarters. Once the door closed behind them, Ethan exploded. "Did you hear the way they talked about us? Like we're some kind of ticking time bomb." Adrian sighed, sinking into a chair. "They're not entirely wrong, Ethan. Humanity has made mistakes. But they're only seeing the worst of us. Yeah, well, they're not exactly rolling out the welcome mat, are they?" Ethan snapped, pacing the room. "You think they'd give us a chance to explain before judging us?" Adrian leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "That's what we're here for, to show them we're more than what they think." The conversation was interrupted by a chime at the door. When it slid open, Oren stood there, flanked by another Concord member, a woman with delicate, crystalline features and eyes that glowed like embers. "This is Eliana," Oren introduced. "She will serve as your cultural liaison during your time here." Eliana stepped forward, her movements graceful and deliberate. "Dr. Cole, Mr. Klein," she said, her voice smooth and melodic. "I look forward to assisting you." Adrian stood, offering a polite smile. "Thank you, Eliana. We appreciate your guidance." Ethan's expression was less welcoming, but he nodded in acknowledgement. Over the following days, Eliana accompanied Adrian and Ethan as they explored the station and engaged in further discussions with the Concord. Her presence was both a blessing and a challenge. While she was courteous and eager to share insights into the Concord's culture, her probing questions about humanity often struck a nerve. One evening, as they stood in the station's observation deck overlooking a vibrant nebula, Eliana turned to Adrian. "Your people have a remarkable capacity for adaptation, but I sense a volatility beneath the surface." Adrian chuckled softly, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Volatility can be a strength, Eliana. It's what drives us to innovate, to survive. But it's also why I keep saying, please don't make us mad." She tilted her head, intrigued. "A curious phrase. What does it mean?" "It means we value peace, but we don't take kindly to being underestimated or provoked," Adrian explained, meeting her gaze. "Humans are at their best when they're pushed, but pushing us too far isn't wise." Eliana studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. "I will remember that." The conversation lingered in Adrian's mind as the days went on. The Concord's skepticism was a constant presence, but he sensed a growing curiosity, especially from Eliana. She seemed genuinely interested in understanding humanity, and Adrian found himself drawn to her sharp intellect and quiet grace. Ethan, however, remained wary. "She's asking too many questions," he said one evening. "You think she's testing us?" "Maybe," Adrian admitted. "But if we're going to change their perception, we need to be open with her. It's a risk, but it's worth taking." As the human stay on the station continued, the fragile peace between Earth and the Concorde hung in the balance. Adrian knew the challenges were far from over, but he also knew this was humanity's chance to prove itself, and he wouldn't let it slip away. Chapter 3. Poking the Sleeping Bear. Title: Poking the Sleeping Bear. Adrian Cole stepped into the Celestial Concorde's Hall of Technology, a sprawling chamber filled with displays of alien advancements that defied human understanding. Around him, sleek drones floated silently, adjusting holograms and showcasing machinery whose purposes he could only guess at. Ethan Klein followed close behind, his expression a mix of fascination and suspicion. "This is insane," he murmured, pointing to a suspended sphere of glowing energy that pulsed in sync with an unseen rhythm. "They've got tech we couldn't dream of. Makes me wonder why they're so interested in us." "They're interested because we're unpredictable," Adrian replied, scanning the room. "To them, we're like fire. Dangerous, but maybe useful if they can figure out how to control us." A Concorde delegate approached, their form crystalline and radiating faint light. "Dr. Cole, Mr. Klein," the alien greeted, its voice resonating like chimes. "You have been granted access to study these exhibits. Use this opportunity wisely." Adrian nodded. "Thank you. We're eager to learn." As the delegate moved away, Ethan leaned closer to Adrian. "Use this opportunity wisely," he mimicked, rolling his eyes. "They're not even subtle about how they look down on us." Adrian smiled faintly. "Let them underestimate us. It'll make what comes next all the more satisfying." Over the next few days, Adrian immersed himself in studying the Concorde's technology. Though much of it was beyond his comprehension, certain concepts sparked ideas, ways humanity might leapfrog decades of development by adapting alien designs. Ethan, meanwhile, focused on analyzing the Concorde's logistical systems, looking for patterns in how they distributed resources and managed their massive station. One evening, as they sat in their quarters, Ethan spread a series of charts and notes across the table. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a cluster of figures. "The Concorde's supply chain relies heavily on centralized hubs. If those hubs were disrupted—" "We're not here to disrupt anything," Adrian interrupted, though his tone lacked conviction. "Our goal is diplomacy, not sabotage." Ethan frowned. "Come on, Adrian. You've seen how they treat us. They're not allies. They're overlords in waiting. Shouldn't we be preparing for the possibility that this goes south?" Adrian sighed, leaning back in his chair. "We prepare by understanding them, not antagonizing them. Besides, we're not here alone. Earth is watching. Every move we make represents humanity." The conversation was interrupted by a chime at the door. It slid open to reveal Eliana, the Concorde's cultural liaison, her crystalline features glinting softly in the room's light. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, her melodic voice cutting through the tension. Adrian stood, offering a polite smile. "Not at all. Please, come in." Eliana stepped inside, her gaze flicking briefly over the charts on the table. "I came to invite you both to a gathering in the Arboretum. It's an opportunity to connect with other delegates in a more relaxed setting." Ethan crossed his arms. "Sounds like a PR stunt." "Ethan," Adrian said sharply, shooting him a look before turning back to Eliana. "We'd be honored to attend." "Thank you." As she turned to leave, Adrian followed her to the door. "Eliana," he said quietly, "I appreciate your effort to include us. I know not everyone here shares your openness." She paused, her glowing eyes meeting his. I believe understanding is the first step toward trust. And trust, Dr. Cole, is something your species will need to earn. The Arboretum was a breathtaking expanse of alien flora, its air perfumed with unfamiliar scents. Delegates from various species mingled beneath trees that shimmered with bioluminescent leaves. Adrian and Ethan entered cautiously, drawing curious glances from the crowd. Adrian made his way to a group of delegates, engaging them in discussions about their cultures and technologies. Meanwhile, Ethan stayed on the periphery, observing the dynamics with a critical eye. As Adrian spoke with a delegate about the challenges of interstellar diplomacy, a sharp voice cut through the conversation. "Dr. Cole, a word?" He turned to see Xyla, a stern, armored member of the Concord's military faction. The alien's piercing gaze and rigid posture radiated authority. "Of course," Adrian said, keeping his tone neutral. Xyla wasted no time. "Your species has shown a troubling pattern of aggression. Wars, environmental destruction, the exploitation of resources. How can we trust you to act responsibly on the galactic stage?" Adrian felt the weight of every eye in the room. He straightened, his voice calm but firm. "Humanity's history is complex, yes. But we've learned from our past. Our ability to adapt and grow is what defines us." "Adapt, perhaps," Xyla replied, his tone dripping with skepticism. "But growth? That remains to be seen." Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Xyla could hear. "You think we're dangerous because we've survived challenges that would break other species. And you're right. But let me be clear. Humans prefer peace. We value it. But if you push us, you'll find out why we keep saying, 'Please don't make us mad.'" Xyla's expression didn't change, but his silence spoke volumes. Later, as Adrian and Ethan returned to their quarters, Ethan broke the silence. "That was risky." Adrian shrugged. "It needed to be said." "Do you think they'll listen?" Ethan asked. "They'll remember," Adrian replied. As he prepared for bed, Adrian's thoughts lingered on the gathering. The Concord was testing humanity, prodding at its limits. But they didn't understand what lay beneath humanity's calm surface, the ingenuity, the determination, the fire. "They'll learn," Adrian murmured to himself. "They'll learn too late why humans kept saying, 'Please don't make us mad.'" Chapter 4. A Different Kind of Power. Title: A Different Kind of Power. The station's arboretum had become Adrian's refuge, a rare pocket of tranquility amid the political maneuvers and thinly veiled suspicions of the celestial Concord. The bioluminescent trees cast a soft glow, their light reflecting on the smooth pathways that wound through vibrant alien flora. Adrian sat on a bench, reviewing notes on his datapad when Eliana appeared, her crystalline features catching the light in a way that made her look almost ethereal. "You spend a great deal of time here," she remarked, approaching him with her usual grace. Adrian looked up and smiled faintly. "It's the only place on this station where the air doesn't feel heavy with judgment." Eliana tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "Judgment? That is a strong word." "It fits," Adrian replied, setting the datapad aside. "Your council views us as a species on trial, constantly measuring our worth while reminding us of our flaws." Eliana sat beside him, her movements as fluid as water. "Can you blame them? Your people's history is complex." Adrian sighed, leaning back against the bench. "Complex doesn't mean irredeemable. But it seems like that's all they see." For a moment, neither spoke. The gentle hum of the station's atmosphere generators was the only sound, mingling with a soft rustle of leaves. Finally, Eliana broke the silence. "Not everyone views humanity so harshly," she said. "Some of us see potential strength in your adaptability and curiosity. Adrian turned to her, his brow furrowed. And what do you see? Eliana's gaze held his for a moment before she smiled faintly. I see both danger and possibility. Humanity fascinates me because you are unpredictable. The Concord fears that unpredictability, but I believe it may be your greatest asset. Adrian chuckled softly. That's the first compliment I've heard since I arrived. It is not a compliment, Eliana said, her tone teasing. It is an observation. Later that day, Adrian and Ethan were summoned to the Concord's Grand Assembly, a rare event where representatives of all member species convened. The chamber was a spectacle of alien grandeur, with rows of crystalline seats arranged in a circular formation beneath a vast dome that displayed a holographic view of the stars. As Adrian and Ethan entered, the low hum of conversation died down. Oren, the Concord's liaison, stepped forward to address the assembly. We have called this meeting to discuss humanity's place in the greater galactic community, Oren announced, his voice resonating through the chamber. Dr. Cole, the floor is yours. Adrian ascended to the central platform, his pulse steady despite the weight of the moment. He began by recounting humanity's achievements, its art, science, and enduring spirit. But as he spoke, he noticed the skeptical expressions of several delegates. When he paused, Xyler, the Concord's military representative, rose from his seat. Dr. Cole, Xyler said, his tone sharp, you speak of progress, but your history tells a different story. Wars, destruction, greed, these are the hallmarks of your species. Adrian met Xyler's gaze without flinching. History is not destiny. Humanity has made mistakes, but those mistakes have taught us resilience and innovation. We are capable of building as much as we are of destroying. Xyler sneered. And yet your presence here feels more like a warning than an invitation. Adrian took a breath, his tone calm but firm. If you see a warning, it's because you're looking for one. Humanity has come to this table in good faith, seeking to learn and share. But I will say this, if you test us, you will learn too late why humans keep saying, please don't make us mad. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Oren stood, his expression unreadable. The Concord does not seek conflict, Dr. Cole. We seek understanding. Then start by giving us the benefit of the doubt, Adrian replied, his voice steady. Treat us as equals, not as a problem to be solved. Oren nodded, signaling the end of the discussion. Adrian descended the platform, rejoining Ethan as the assembly dispersed. You really had to drop the "don't make us mad" line again? Ethan whispered, his tone both amused and exasperated. They need to hear it, Adrian replied. They need to understand that our willingness to cooperate doesn't make us weak. That evening, Adrian returned to the Arboretum, needing space to process the day's events. Eliana found him there again, this time carrying 2 small flasks filled with a glowing liquid. A gift, she said, handing him one. It's a traditional drink among my people. I thought you might appreciate something other than your earth beverages. Adrian took the flask, examining its iridescent contents. I'm almost afraid to ask what's in it. Eliana laughed softly, a sound that was surprisingly human. It is safe, I assure you. He took a cautious sip and was surprised by the drink's sweet, slightly tangy flavor. Not bad, he admitted, though I think I'll stick to coffee for late nights. They sat in companionable silence, the tension of the day easing in the garden's tranquil atmosphere. After a while, Eliana spoke. You handled yourself well today, she said. Even Xyler seemed quieted. Quieted isn't the same as convinced, Adrian replied. But it's a start. Eliana studied him, her expression thoughtful. You carry much on your shoulders, Adrian. More than most could bear. I'm not most, he said simply. I'm human. Her lips curved into a soft smile. Indeed, you are. For the first time since arriving on the station, Adrian felt a flicker of genuine connection, a reminder that beneath the politics and posturing, there was still room for understanding, even in the vastness of the galaxy. Chapter 5. The Silent Threat. Title: The Silent Threat. Adrian sat in his quarters, staring at the holographic display hovering above his desk. Lines of alien text and schematics filled the air, symbols he was beginning to understand thanks to the long hours spent studying the Concorde's data archives. Ethan paced behind him, restless as always. "You're way too calm," Ethan said, stopping to peer over Adrian's shoulder. "We're on a floating diplomatic knife's edge, and your acting like this is just another Tuesday." Adrian smirked, his eyes not leaving the display. "That's because panicking doesn't solve anything. Besides, they're the ones who should be nervous." Ethan scoffed, running a hand through his short hair. "They don't look nervous to me. Every meeting we've had, they talk down to us like we're cavemen who accidentally figured out fire." Adrian turned off the display and leaned back in his chair. "And that's their mistake. They think they're so advanced that nothing we do could ever surprise them. But you and I both know humans are at our best when our backs are against the wall." Ethan crossed his arms, still unconvinced. "You've been dropping that 'don't make us mad' line like it's some kind of mantra. You think it's actually sinking in?" Adrian smiled faintly. "Not yet. But they'll figure it out eventually." Later that day, Adrian and Ethan joined Eliana in the Concorde's research wing, a sprawling labyrinth of laboratories and workshops. The Concorde had granted them limited access to their technology, a gesture meant to foster goodwill, but also clearly designed to showcase the Concorde's superiority. Eliana led them to a room filled with translucent consoles and hovering displays. "This is where we study biological systems," she explained, gesturing to a series of tanks filled with glowing organisms. "Our advancements in medicine and genetics have allowed us to eliminate disease and extend lifespans across the Concorde." Adrian studied the tanks with genuine admiration. "Impressive. But I imagine it took centuries to develop these techniques." "It did," Eliana admitted, "and it required a level of collaboration that your species has yet to achieve." Ethan, standing a few steps behind, muttered under his breath, "There it is again. The condescension." Adrian shot him a warning glance before addressing Eliana. "Collaboration is something we're learning, slowly but surely. And when humans learn, we innovate." Eliana's expression softened slightly. "I've noticed. Your capacity for adaptation is remarkable, even if it can be unpredictable." Ethan couldn't help himself. "You mean dangerous?" Eliana hesitated, her crystalline eyes meeting Adrian's. "Perhaps. But danger is not inherently negative. It depends on how it is channeled." Adrian nodded. "And that's why we're here, to show that humanity can channel its strengths toward growth, not destruction." As the tour continued, Adrian noticed a recurring theme in the Concorde's designs. Their systems were centralized, with key nodes controlling vast networks. It was a weakness, one the Concorde likely didn't recognize because their society had never faced a coordinated challenge from an unpredictable force. Later that night, back in their quarters, Adrian and Ethan discussed what they had seen. "They're so focused on how advanced they are, they don't see their vulnerabilities," Adrian said, pacing the room. "Their systems are efficient, but brittle. Disrupt one node, and you could take down an entire sector." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying we should start planning to?" "No," Adrian cut him off. "Not unless we have no choice. But understanding their weaknesses is part of understanding them." If they ever push us too far, we need to be ready. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. So we just sit here, letting them look down their noses at us, hoping they don't cross the line? Adrian met his gaze, his expression hard. They're testing us, Ethan. But they don't realize we're testing them, too. The next morning, Adrian was summoned to another council meeting. This time, the topic was Earth's resource management practices, a thinly veiled criticism of humanity's environmental history. Adrian listened patiently as delegate after delegate voiced their concerns. Finally, it was his turn to speak. "You're right," he began, surprising the room. "Humanity hasn't always been kind to its planet. But we've learned from our mistakes. And what's more, we've learned how to survive in conditions that would break others." A delegate with an insect-like form clicked its mandibles. "Survival is not the same as progress." "True," Adrian replied, his tone measured. "But survival is the foundation of progress. You look at our past and see chaos. I look at it and see potential." The murmurs of the council grew louder, some skeptical, others intrigued. Oren raised a hand to quiet them. "Dr. Cole, your perspective is noted. But the Concord must consider the long-term implications of your species' inclusion." Adrian nodded, his voice steady. "Take your time. Just remember that humanity has always thrived in the face of doubt. And if you push us, you'll learn too late why humans kept saying, 'Please don't make us mad.'" Back in the Arboretum that evening, Adrian found Eliana waiting for him. She was seated on a low bench beneath a tree whose branches glowed with soft, shifting colors. "You enjoy making the council uncomfortable," she said as he approached. Adrian chuckled, sitting beside her. "They need to be uncomfortable. It's the only way they'll take us seriously." Eliana studied him for a moment, her crystalline features unreadable. "You walk a fine line, Adrian. But I believe you understand the stakes better than most." "I understand one thing," Adrian replied. "Respect isn't given, it's earned. And sometimes, you have to demand it." Eliana smiled faintly. "Perhaps that is something humanity and the Concord can learn from each other." They sat in silence for a while, watching the gentle sway of the glowing branches above. Though the tensions between Earth and the Concord remained, Adrian felt a small shift, a crack in the wall of distrust. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Chapter 6. The Unseen Power. Title: The Unseen Power. Adrian paced the length of the conference room, the faint hum of the station's engines a backdrop to his thoughts. The latest council session had been another round of veiled accusations, subtle threats, and growing suspicion. Ethan leaned against the wall, watching Adrian with a frown. "You're wearing a groove in the floor. What's on your mind?" Adrian stopped, running a hand through his hair. "They're escalating. Every question, every comment. It's not just skepticism anymore. They're looking for an excuse to control us, to keep us in check." Ethan nodded grimly. "Yeah, I've noticed. And they're getting bolder about it. What's the plan?" Adrian took a deep breath. "We need to show them that humanity isn't to be underestimated, but without giving them a reason to label us as a threat. It's a delicate balance." Ethan smirked. "Subtlety isn't exactly my strong suit, but I'll follow your lead." Before Adrian could respond, the door slid open, and Eliana entered. Her crystalline form caught the light, and her expression was thoughtful, almost wary. "Dr. Cole," she began, her tone measured, "the Council has requested your presence for a special briefing tomorrow. It concerns your species' intentions in the wider galaxy." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Special briefing? That sounds ominous." "It is unusual," Eliana admitted, stepping further into the room. "I believe certain factions within the Concord are pushing for more direct action regarding Earth." Ethan straightened, his posture tense. "Direct action? Are you saying they're planning to?" "I don't know their intentions," Eliana interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "But I wanted to warn you. The Council is divided, and some see your presence here as a provocation." Adrian studied her, his mind racing. "Why are you telling us this?" She hesitated before answering. "Because I believe in understanding, not suppression. I've come to know you, Adrian, and I see that humanity has much to offer. But I fear others will not give you the chance to prove it." The next day, Adrian and Ethan entered the council chamber, the air heavier than usual with tension. Oren greeted them with his usual calm demeanor, but there was a flicker of unease in his glowing eyes. "Dr. Cole, Mr. Klein," Oren began, "we've convened this session to address concerns raised by several members of the Concord. Specifically, concerns about humanity's potential for conflict." Adrian nodded, his expression neutral. "I appreciate the opportunity to address those concerns directly." Xyler, the Concord's military representative, rose from his seat. His armored form loomed over the chamber, his voice sharp and commanding. "Dr. Cole, your people have demonstrated an alarming tendency toward aggression and conquest. How do you intend to ensure that this behavior does not extend beyond your world?" Adrian met Xyler's gaze, his tone steady. "Humanity has faced conflict, yes. But it's also through those struggles that we've learned the value of cooperation and innovation. Our history isn't a warning, it's a lesson. A lesson in destruction," Xyler retorted. "Your people's ingenuity is matched only by your capacity for chaos." Adrian stepped forward, his voice firm but calm. "Chaos and ingenuity often go hand in hand. But let me make one thing clear. Humanity doesn't seek to dominate or destroy. We seek to grow. And if you continue to view us only through the lens of our past, you'll miss the potential we bring to the future." The room was silent for a moment, tension thick in the air. Oren finally spoke, his tone conciliatory. "The Concord does not take these matters lightly, Dr. Cole. We will deliberate further." As Adrian and Ethan left the chamber, Ethan shook his head. "They're not backing down. If anything, they're digging in." "They're scared," Adrian replied. "Scared of what we represent. And that fear is making them act recklessly." That evening, Adrian found himself in the Arboretum again, the glowing trees casting soft shadows across the pathways. Eliana was there, as if she had been waiting for him. "You handled yourself well today," she said, her voice carrying a note of admiration. "Thanks, but I don't think it changed much," Adrian replied, sitting beside her on a low bench. "They're still focused on the worst parts of humanity." Eliana tilted her head, studying him. "Perhaps they fear you because they see something of themselves in you. The Concord was not always a peaceful coalition. Our history, too, is marked by conflict and loss." Adrian looked at her, surprised. "I didn't realize that." "It is not something we share often," Eliana admitted. "But it shaped us, just as your history has shaped you. The difference is that we have learned to fear what we once were." Adrian nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why you see us as a threat, because we remind you of what you're trying to forget." Eliana's gaze softened. "Perhaps. But I also see potential in you, Adrian. You are bold in a way the Concord has forgotten. That boldness is dangerous, yes, but it is also necessary." They sat in silence for a while, the unspoken tension between their species mirrored in the quiet stillness of the Arboretum. Finally, Adrian spoke. "Eliana, if it ever comes to it, if the Concord pushes too far, They'll learn the hard way why humans keep saying, "Please don't make us mad." She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "I hope it does not come to that, Adrian. But if it does, I will remember your words." As the glowing trees swayed gently in the artificial breeze, Adrian felt the weight of the future pressing down on him. The Concord's fears were pushing them toward a confrontation, but humanity's strength lay in its ability to adapt and endure. And if the time came to show that strength, Adrian knew the galaxy would never forget what it learned. Chapter 7. The Tables Turn. Title: The Tables Turn. The Concord's council chamber buzzed with tension as Adrian and Ethan entered. The atmosphere was colder than usual, the once civil exchanges now brimming with unspoken hostility. Adrian adjusted his jacket, his expression calm, though the intensity in his eyes betrayed his underlying focus. Ethan leaned closer to him as they took their positions. "This feels off," he murmured. "They're planning something." "They've been planning something since we got here," Adrian replied under his breath. "But they still underestimate us. That's their first mistake." At the center of the chamber, Oren began the meeting. His voice resonated with its usual practiced diplomacy, but there was an edge to his tone. "Dr. Cole, Mr. Klein, recent developments have prompted us to reassess humanity's role in this coalition. There are those among us who question whether your species can be trusted to act responsibly on the galactic stage." Adrian kept his expression neutral. "I'd be curious to hear what these recent developments are." Xyler, the Concord's military delegate, stood, his armored form casting a long shadow across the room. "Our observation units have noted increased activity in your planet's defense systems. Satellite launches, expanded weaponry. These are not the actions of a species seeking peace." Ethan's jaw tightened, but Adrian raised a hand, silently signaling him to stay calm. "Earth is preparing for the unknown, Xyler. If we're stepping into a galaxy filled with advanced civilizations, it would be foolish not to ensure our survival. Preparation is not aggression." Spoken like someone who hides a dagger behind their back, Xyler shot back. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his tone even but firm. "And spoken like someone who's afraid of what that dagger represents. Fear of the unknown isn't a justification for treating us as a threat. It's an opportunity to learn." The chamber fell silent for a moment, the weight of Adrian's words hanging in the air. Oren cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the discussion. "This is not about fear. It is about stability. Humanity's actions must align with the Concord's principles if we are to move forward." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "And what principles are those? Suppression? Control? You claim to value understanding, but all I've seen is judgment." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, some delegates nodding in agreement while others exchanged uneasy glances. Adrian seized the moment. "Humanity isn't perfect," he continued. "We're flawed, yes, but those flaws drive us to improve, to innovate. You see our struggles and call them chaos. I see them as progress." Eliana, seated among the delegates, watched him closely. Her expression was unreadable, but Adrian caught a flicker of something in her crystalline eyes. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. Later, back in their quarters, Ethan paced furiously while Adrian reviewed the day's notes. "They're pushing harder," Ethan said, his voice tight with frustration. "It's only a matter of time before they try something drastic." "They already are," Adrian replied without looking up. "They're trying to isolate us, make us look like the unstable newcomers." Ethan stopped pacing and stared at him. "And what's your plan? Because sitting around and playing nice isn't cutting it." Adrian finally met his gaze, his expression sharp. "The plan is to let them overreach. They think we're predictable, But they don't understand how humans think. They don't see the connections we've been making. Ethan frowned. Connections? Adrian turned his datapad toward him, displaying a web of data points, patterns in the Concord systems, vulnerabilities in their infrastructure, and the subtle influence humanity had begun to exert through cultural and technological exchanges. We've been learning, Adrian said. Their strengths, their weaknesses. And while they've been focused on keeping us in check, we've been preparing. The turning point came 2 days later. The Concord initiated a simulated negotiation exercise, claiming it was designed to test humanity's diplomatic skills. Adrian recognized it for what it was, a staged attempt to undermine Earth's credibility. The simulation involved a scenario where humanity was required to mediate a dispute between two fictional civilizations. The Concord's expectations were clear. They wanted humanity to fail, to show the Council that Earth was unfit for the complexities of galactic politics. Adrian played along, analyzing every move and decision presented in the simulation. He used humanity's strengths, creativity, adaptability, and emotional intelligence to navigate the scenario with surprising success. Ethan, initially skeptical of the exercise, contributed by identifying patterns and loopholes in the simulation's design. By the end of the exercise, Adrian had not only resolved the fictional dispute, but had also exposed flaws in the Concord's own negotiation protocols. This simulation, Adrian said during the debrief, was designed to test us. But in doing so, it revealed weaknesses in your approach. Humanity's adaptability isn't a liability. It's an asset. The Council was silent, stunned by the outcome. Even Xyla, who had been the most vocal critic, seemed at a loss for words. That evening, Adrian and Eliana met in the Arboretum. She was unusually quiet, her gaze fixed on the glowing branches of the trees. "You surprised them today," she said finally. "They didn't expect you to navigate the simulation so effectively." Adrian shrugged. "They underestimated us. It's becoming a pattern." Eliana turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "You've shown them something they didn't want to see, that humanity can match, even exceed, their expectations. But that also makes you more dangerous in their eyes." Adrian smiled faintly. "Dangerous isn't the same as reckless. They need to understand that we're not looking for conflict. But if they push us, we'll push back." Eliana studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Be careful, Adrian. The Concord is not used to being challenged." "They'll learn," Adrian replied. "And when they do, they'll understand why humans keep saying, 'Please don't make us mad.'" Chapter 8. The Universe Learned Too Late. Title: The Universe Learned Too Late Why Humans Kept Saying, "Please Don't Make Us Mad." Adrian stood at the edge of the Concord's central observation deck, staring out into the vast expanse of space. The stars glittered like diamonds scattered on black velvet, their light a reminder of the immense potential and danger of the galaxy. The Concord station hummed with its usual life, but the tension among its leaders was palpable. Something was about to break. Ethan approached, holding a small data pad. "It's done," he said, his voice low. "The simulations, the cultural data, the resource algorithms. You were right. They rely on a level of stability that we could shatter without ever firing a shot." Adrian turned, his expression unreadable. "Good. But we're not using it unless they force our hand." Ethan frowned. "You think they'll back off after today?" "They will," Adrian said, his voice firm. "Because after today, they'll finally understand what they're dealing with." The council chamber was packed. Delegates from every member species filled the seats, their attention focused on Adrian as he took his place at the center platform. Eliana was among them, her crystalline features calm but her gaze sharp, as if she anticipated what was coming. Oren stood, his voice resonating with authority. "Dr. Cole, we have gathered here to determine humanity's place within the Concord. Concerns have been raised about your species' intentions, your history, and your potential impact on galactic stability. This is your final opportunity to address these concerns." Adrian nodded, taking a slow breath before speaking. "Thank you, Oren. I'll be direct. Humanity didn't come here to beg for inclusion or to prove ourselves to anyone. We came here to learn, to share, and to build relationships as equals." He looked around the chamber, his gaze steady. "But since the moment we arrived, we've been met with skepticism, condescension, and thinly veiled hostility. You've judged us based on our past without considering what we've become, or what we could be." Xyla rose, his armored form imposing. "Your past cannot be ignored. Your people have shown a dangerous capacity for destruction. We would be fools to overlook that." Adrian's expression hardened. "And that's your mistake. You think humanity's capacity for destruction defines us. It doesn't. What defines us is our capacity to adapt, to survive, and to turn adversity into strength." The room murmured, some delegates exchanging uneasy glances. Adrian continued, his voice rising with conviction. "You've tried to test us, to push us, to see how far we'll bend. But let me make one thing clear. Humanity doesn't break. And if you push us too far, you'll learn why we keep saying, 'Please don't make us mad.'" Xyla scoffed. "Empty threats from a species barely capable of interstellar travel." Adrian smiled faintly. "Is it? Because while you've been watching us, we've been watching you. We've studied your systems, your structures, your vulnerabilities. And what we've learned is that your so-called stability is a facade, one that humanity could dismantle without ever raising a weapon." The chamber erupted into chaos, delegates shouting in alarm or anger. Oren raised his hands, his voice cutting through the noise. "Enough. Dr. Cole, are you saying humanity has taken hostile action against the Concord?" Adrian shook his head. "Not yet. And we don't want to. But if you continue treating us like a threat, we'll respond like one. Humanity's strength isn't in our weapons. It's in our minds. Underestimate us, and you'll regret it." Eliana stood, her voice calm but firm. "Dr. Cole, this is not the way to build trust." Adrian turned to her, his tone softening. "Eliana, trust is built on respect. And respect is earned, not given. If the Concord wants peace with humanity, it starts with treating us as equals." The room fell into tense silence. Finally, Oren spoke, his tone measured. "Dr. Cole, your words carry weight, but they also carry risk. The Concord must deliberate further before making a decision." Adrian nodded. "Take all the time you need. Just remember, what happens next is up to you." As Adrian and Ethan left the chamber, Ethan let out a low whistle. "That was intense. You think they'll back down?" "They will," Adrian said confidently, "because they're starting to realize that humanity isn't just another species to control." Later that evening, Adrian met Eliana in the Arboretum. The garden's glowing trees cast a soft light over her crystalline features, and her expression was thoughtful. "You've made quite an impression," she said, her tone neutral. "They needed to hear it," Adrian replied. "They've been pushing us since day one, and it was time to push back." Eliana studied him for a moment. "You risked everything with that speech. If the Council sees it as a threat—" "They won't," Adrian interrupted, "because they know it wasn't a threat. It was a warning, a reminder that humanity is capable of far more than they realize." Eliana's gaze softened. "You truly believe humanity can coexist with the Concord?" "I do," Adrian said without hesitation. But only if the Concord learns to see us for who we are, not who they think we are. As they sat in the quiet glow of the garden, Adrian felt a sense of calm for the first time in weeks. The Concord had underestimated humanity, but now they were beginning to see the truth. And if they ever forgot, Adrian knew the universe would learn too late why humans kept saying, "Please don't make us mad."